So now we will discuss the complete MRP matrix or MRP grid. So there are actually 6 components in an MRP grid. So we are having gross requirements, we have scheduled receipts, we have projected available or projected available balance, we have net requirements, we have plan order receipt, and we have planned order release. So first I will define all of these 6 terms, and then we will solve a couple of examples. So first, the gross requirements. So the total demand placed on the component or assembly. So that is the gross requirements. The gross requirements, the total demand placed on the component or assembly. For items that are used in multiple assemblies, this value represents the cumulative demand derived from the parent bill of materials in which they are located. So if one component is used in more than one products, then we will sum up the requirement of that component in all the final products or assemblies. The gross requirement for the end item comes from MPS. And the gross requirement for the components actually comes from the planned order release of the parent. So that should be kept in mind. Then we have MPS scheduled receipts, manufacturing or purchased orders that have been released and are currently in the work in process or at the supplier. So you have already released the order for purchasing of the components or manufacturing of the components, but you have not received that order. So either that is in the work in process of your organization, or that is still with the supplier. Supplier has not supplied it yet. So these orders are expected to be available to match the actual need date of demand appearing in a period. So these are also called open orders, that are open shop orders in the case of being manufactured in the organization, or open purchased orders in the case of item being purchased. So after the gross requirements and scheduled receipts, we have projected available balance. So this is actually the ending inventory, and its formula is the same as we had in the case of MPS. So conceptually, this is the same formula. So ending inventory or projected available balance in a period T is equal to projected available balance in the previous period plus scheduled receipts in that period plus planned order receipts in that period minus gross requirements. So all these 3 quantities are showing the supply, and this is showing the demand. So supply consists of previous period's inventory plus whatever you are receiving in this period in the form of scheduled receipts or planned order receipts. So the demand is the gross requirements. Then we have net requirements. The fourth entity in the MRP grid are the net requirements. The amount of inventory below the available balance. So the formula is net requirements are gross requirements minus previous period's inventory minus this period's scheduled receipts. So they are the net requirements. So again, this is the demand minus this is the supply. Now this net requirements is very important because this is the prime trigger for generation of MRP planned orders. So whenever net requirements are positive, then you will trigger the planned order. So whenever the net requirements are negative or 0, then you will not trigger the planned order, because the in this case you will having actually the more inventory in the case of negative net requirements than are the requirements. So you will not need a planned order because demand is less than the supply. Same is true for zero, of course, assuming that we are not using the safety stock. So whenever this net requirements is positive, then you will trigger the planned order. So that is the key component in MRP. So again, the negative means that the gross requirements are smaller than the supply. So in the case of negative, you will not place the order. And when this is positive, that is gross requirements are greater than the supply, then you will place the order. So this should be clear. Then we have planned order receipt and planned order release, the last two entries. So the planned order receipt, this second last, the quantity generated by the system to cover the net requirements. So based on the net requirements, there is planned order release, and when that quantity is received, that is called planned order receipt. So the quantity normally generated is some form of replenishment lot size. So this quantity depends upon the lot size. The planned orders are placed in the schedule by the due date. Now the planned order release is the date MRP planned orders are to be released by the planner. These are calculated by subtracting the lead time to make the lot size from the MRP planned order receipt date. So that is something that we have already discussed. That is, if you need something, for example, in week 5, and the lead time is 2 weeks, so you will place the order 2 weeks earlier. So that is this last point. So these are the 6 components or 6 elements in MRP matrix. These time periods are called time buckets. So in this case, the time bucket is a week. And for example, if we are making a plan for 5 weeks, so that is called the planning horizon. So this planning horizon should be at least equal to the cumulative lead time of the final product. Now let's solve an example in order to reinforce these concepts. So I would recommend you, if you have that Word file or the Excel file that I sent you through email, to use that and solve along with me to better understand these concepts. So open that file. It is recommended that you solve in that file along. Again, we are having these time buckets, so that is a week. And we are given the gross requirement for this product for the next 8 weeks, or say approximately 2 months. And we have to calculate the net requirements, and based on those net requirements, we have to release the order in the corresponding week. So the lot size policy is a fixed order quantity of 150 units. So whenever we will place order, it should be at least 150 or something greater than 150. The beginning inventory before this week 1 is 125 units. And in this case, we are not using any safety stock, so that is 0. So for the first period, the gross requirements are 120 and available inventory is 125. So the net requirements are negative. So we will not have any plan order receipt in this case. So after meeting this requirement of 120 using these 125 components, we will have a balance of 5. So that is simple. 125 minus 120 is 5. So we will be left with 5 components. So there will be no planned order release or receipt in the first period, and we can say that the net requirements are zero. There are no net requirements. Now we had already placed an order before this week 1 of a quantity of 125 that we are receiving in week 2. So you can say that is an open order or a late order that we are receiving. So the total supply is 5 plus 120, that is 130. And the gross requirements are 120, or we can say that 120 minus 5 to be straightforward, minus 125. So that is minus 10. So net requirements are again negative. So we do not need any plan order receipt here. So you can say that net requirements are zero because the requirements are smaller than the supply. So negative requirements, or there are no requirements. So the total supply is this 5 previous periods inventory plus casual receipts minus the requirements are 120. So we will be left with 10 units at the end of week 2. So I hope you are following, and I hope you are solving as well. So I repeat that we had inventory of 5 from the previous period, 125 are received in week 2, so total 130, and we had a requirement of 120. So we will be left with an inventory of 10 at the end of second week. Now we have an inventory of 10 and there is a requirement of 110. So we are having positive net requirement, that is 110 minus 10. So this is the gross requirement minus what we have at hand. So that is 100. So we are having a net requirement of 100 in week 3. So here we need some inventory to be available. Now we have a lot size policy of 150. So we need to have 150 items received in week 3. Now the lead time is 1 week. So the order of this 150 should be placed at least 1 week earlier. So that order is placed in week 2 so that we can receive these items in week 3. Now what we will be left with in week 3? So we are having 10 from previous period and 150 this one. This is the total supply minus demand is 110. So 160 minus 110. So we will be left with 50. So projected available at the end of week 3 will be 50. Now we are having 50 items available at the end of week 3. So that will be the beginning inventory for week 4. And the requirements are 95. So again, 95 are the requirements minus 50 is available. So that is positive net requirement. So we do need some plan order receipts here. So the net requirements are 45. Net requirements are 45. So the lot size policy is 150. So we need to, the net requirements are 45. So we have net requirements of 45. So we need to receive 150 here. So the order should be placed 1 week earlier. So the order is placed in week 3 so that we can receive these 150 in week 4. Now, what is the total supply and what is the total demand and what we will be left with? So we had actually 50 from the previous week and 150 this one. So 50 plus 150 is 200 minus 95. So we will be left with 105 at the end of week 4. So the ending inventory in week 4 is 105. Now we are having this 105 available and there is a requirement of 95. So the net requirement will be negative. So we do not need any plan order receipt here. So after meeting this requirement actually, so net requirement is 0. So after meeting this requirement, we will be left with an inventory of 10. So this is what we are having by the end of week 5. Now in week 6, of course, there is a negative net requirement. So that is obvious that 10 minus 110 is, sorry, it should be opposite. So it should be a positive net requirement, 110 minus 10, so 100. So net requirement is 100. Gross requirement of 110 minus available inventory of 10. So the net requirement is 100 for week 6. So we do need to have plan order receipt here and lead time is of course 1 week. So we need to place an order here so that it can be received in week 6 at the beginning of week 6. So what we will be left with in week 6 at the end of week 6. So total supply is 10 from previous week. So this 10 plus 150. So 10 plus 150 is the total supply minus 110. So 160 minus 110 is 50. So we will be left with an inventory of 50 at the end of week 6. So this is what we are having by the end of week 6. So again, there will be positive requirements. So 125 minus 50 is 75. So that is the net requirement, the difference of these two. Gross requirements minus previous period's inventory. So we have a net requirement of 75. So the lot size is 150. So we need to receive 150 in week 7. So order will be placed a week earlier so that this order is received here. So we are having the total supply of 50 plus 150. So this 50 from previous period plus this 150 from this period. So 50 plus 150 is the total supply minus the gross requirements were 125. So 200 minus 125 is 75. So ending inventory by the end of week 7 will also be 75. And again, the net requirements are positive, 135 minus 75. So that will be 60, 135 minus 75. So the net requirements are 60. And we need a plan order receipt here. Order is placed 1 week earlier so that this is received here. So what is the total on hand in this case? So that is ending inventory from previous period. So that is 75 minus 150. So that is 225 minus 135. So that is 75 plus 150 minus 135. So that is 225 minus 135. That is equal to 90. So we will be left with 90 items by the end of week 8. So these are the basic calculations, but you should keep in mind what we are actually doing. What is the output of this process? So this last row is the output of this whole process, that we need to place an order of 150 in each of the week 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. So that is the output of MRP matrix. So if you are purchasing this item, these quantities should be purchase orders. And if you are making this item, then these quantities should be production orders.